Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Uncorked with Funny Wine Girl. This is Funny Wine Girl, aka Janine Luby. And I don't know if you can feel it, but love is in the air. I don't know. It might be hard to break through the mask, but it's out there. It is definitely out there in the air. It's February. And, whether let's talk about love for a second. When I say love is in the air, love takes all shapes and sizes and forms, and it is not one definition. We know that for sure. Love is love. And whether you're in a relationship or you're not, I mean, let's face it, we're all in relationships, right? We're in a relationship with ourselves, which quite frankly is the number one most important relationship. We have to be good to ourselves. We're in relationships with our family, our friends. So we all have a lot of different relationships out there. So whatever it is, going out with friends for Valentine's Day, treating yourself to a nice night, a massage, a manicure, a pedicure, bundling up and just having a nice glass of wine and some chocolate and watching some movies. You just treat yourself well, treat others well. And that's love is, like I said, it's all different kinds of descriptions and definitions. But we do want to talk a little bit about some love stories with couples because Valentine's Day typically centers around that. But like I said, we're not going to dwell on that because this is just meant to be fun. So I have a very special guest with me who does amazing work with history. She does a annual tour at the cemetery, the Departed Players in Dunmore, which is right outside of Scranton in Pennsylvania. She's a local historian, and Julie is someone who has multi-talents, by the way. She crochets, she plays the ukulele. She's just an all-around fun kind of gal. And I got to meet Julie doing one of my interesting jobs as a standardized patient at the medical college. So Julie and I have shared many ailments through the years. And in fact, it just hit me now. I wonder what it would have been like if we were SPs back in like 1902. Would we have played a case of tuberculosis or something like that? I don't know. That would be kind of interesting to investigate. But anyway, I would like to welcome this week's guest, Julie. I always want to say Etsy because I think of the damn website. Julie Esty is joining us from Scranton, a local historian and talented all-around woman. So welcome, Julie.
How's it going, Janine?
Oh, it's going well. And you are smiling as always. You're so full of like life. I would definitely say that. You always have something fun going on.
I try. I
You
try.
do.
They
You
see
do.
that I have life when I spend time in a cemetery.
Well, that's true. You have life and you have afterlife. So Julie, we know that your Departed Players, you do this really awesome thing in Dunmore in the cemetery, and that's in the fall. Usually that's in October, but we're coming to you about love stories. So why don't we start with your love story? What would you like to share about what's going on in your love life right now?
Um, well, many, many years ago, I dated a very nice gentleman, and his name was Tom. And I'm talking many, many years ago, more years than I would care to think about, like three. And we dated on and off for most of the 1980s. And we never fought, never had any problem or whatever. It's just like, we would date and then we would go off in separate directions, and then every once in a while we'd get back and we'd do our thing, and then we'd go off in separate directions. And what happened was we ended up to go see Paul McCartney at Vet Stadium, and we met Paul McCartney, and then when we came back we went off in separate directions, and the both of us ended up getting married to other people. And time went on, years went on, and the pandemic came along, and I was crocheting something, I don't know, and he happened to notice on Facebook that I had this little particular item, up for grabs, and he wanted it. And he showed up here, and with the pandemic, you were afraid to let anyone in the house, or you were going to get the virus, and everything was like really bad. So it was like, here's your item, like just toss it from like a distance. But he came back the following week, and then the following week, we were sitting in the backyard with the fire pit, and then the next thing you know, you've got a fire, like it's like almost medieval, because like you're trying to burn the COVID germs in 2020. And the next thing you know, we were out there with the fire pit, and now we've got a bottle of wine. And we've been dating now since January or so, 2021. I guess that's it. Is it? It's like a year now. I mean, time is somewhat of a blur, but it's nice to be with someone that I knew from so long ago and got along with so well. So
And so who says love can't happen during the pandemic? Look, I mean, we were like you said, you had the mask on. You're like, okay, is this safe or not? But you hung out outside, and then the relationship grew, and you already knew each other, which is awesome. So you had a
yeah.
little bit of nice history to build on, right?
Yeah, finally, like what I say, enough is enough. Like, just, if you're gonna get it, you're gonna get it. Like, just open the door. I mean, what are you gonna do? You can't sit outside here in the snow forever. That's what happened, and we've been, you know, seeing each other again for just about a year, and it's really very nice.
Well, I have to say it because we're friends on Facebook, and you seem like you're happy and you're having a great time, which really is what you should be about in life. You
Yeah.
guys do concerts, you go out there, and you're always having a ball, especially in the springtime and summer. You're out there a lot outdoors, and you just look really, truly happy. So that is something that makes other people happy. At least I do. When I see it, I go, I'm glad she's enjoying life.
We're trying.
Good, good. Well, so that was a nice story of reconnection, right? So you knew him, you guys both went your separate ways, but again, it was meant to be. I would like to believe that it's meant to be because you guys came back together. You have, as a historian, you read and do research on all kinds of interesting people, especially locally. I will say, Julie and I both are here in Scranton, Pennsylvania. So Julie does a lot of local research. And you find, trust me, you find a lot of good stories right here in Northeastern Pennsylvania. And you've done your research because you also do, like I said, the tour in the cemetery, but you have some interesting stories that involve some lovers and some scandal and some fun stuff that you're going to share with us today. I know.
Oh, I do. There's some very, very interesting lovers in Scranton's past, Dunmore's past, the past of the Lackawanna Valley. Um, One, my daughter Megan said that I should tell you about, and I didn't mention it to you previous to this, is the hat pin mystery.
Ooh.
There was a young lady who lived in Dunmore, and she had been dating a gentleman for, a while. And we're talking late 1800s, when women are wearing an awful lot of clothes and they're making their clothes, and their dressmaking pins were much bigger than what we've got now. And if you ever sewed anything like a period costume, like you need a lot of pins to put those hems in. Okay, so it would be very, very easy to miss one somewhere when you're taking them out. I mean, I've done it. I've constructed things, and I've worn them 2 or 3 times. And then all of a sudden one day I'm getting like this little pick or whatever. And you realize that you left a pin in whatever it was that you made. Well, we've got this, young lady, and she's dating this gentleman, and they're kind of an on again, off again. You know how it goes. I mean, sometimes it's not always like me and Tom, where we always, we got along, we just went separate ways. Sometimes you have couples that fight.
Yeah.
And these two disagreed from time to time. And the one night she was coming home from a social event in Dunmore, and he happened to be standing outside one of the establishments, and he saw her coming with one of her friends, and he said that he wanted to talk to her. So he took her into one of the courts in Dunmore, and they sat down and they were talking. And of course, one thing leads to another, we're going to reconcile here. And he grabs her and hugs her and pulls her close. I'm kind of suspecting it could have been a little bit more than just an embrace. I think there might have been something more going on there. But what happens is that the pin in something that she constructed that she was wearing stabbed him. And I believe from our medical college deal that she happened to this pin stabbed him somewhere in the vicinity of the PMI.
Okay, under the heart there. Yep.
And it broke off.
Ooh.
And
Oh.
now he's feeling this. And he goes home, and he's not doing well, because of course every time he's breathing and his heart is pumping, it's getting stabbed with this pin.
Ooh.
And his friends tried to get him to the hospital, but back then the ambulance would not come from Scranton to Dunmore. So by the time it occurred to somebody to call a cab and take him down to the hospital, he's like dying. Okay, so he gets down there. He did tell one of his friends that this Katie she didn't murder him, that it was an accident. He's trying to preserve her honor here. He doesn't really want to come out with what was going on, but Katie's dress stabbed him and he ended up dying.
Oh.
And the police really ran her through the mill. I mean, it's horrifying when you see how they tried to get this woman to admit that she murdered him.
Oh my God.
And I don't think she murdered him. I do think it was more than an embrace. I think there might have been something going on. There might have been a little less clothes involved in, if you get where I'm going.
Yeah, it was a little more amorous than an embrace.
Yeah, it was a little bit more amorous. I mean, maybe the hem, that waist was, and the pin was more exposed. And knowing the length of the pins back then,
They were pretty long, right?
some of them were, and probably much, much better quality than what we have today.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So, we have those lovers right there who came to a very, very bad end. He did die, and she was raked over the coals. And then finally the police said, well, she didn't do it. It was an accident. And, she went on to live her life. And, I often wondered, if she thought every time she constructed something after that, if she thought of, her lover in the alley in Dunmore and what happened that night.
Did she precipitate the invention of Velcro, maybe? Or I don't know. Maybe, I don't know. Any guys who dated her again said, okay, honey, take the pens out before we get started.
Yeah, you just don't want to go. But, there you go. And that was big news, the hat pin mystery.
I just love, that's a great name for, the Hat Pin Mystery. That's an awesome name for some kind of novel or play or anything like that. I love it.
I actually investigated it. There were a lot of other people who did die or were injured due to hat pins or very large pins left in ladies' clothing. So it was not the only incident. I mean, of course, there were other, like internationally, when I was looking at this. So it's not beyond the realm of possibility that something funky did happen with those two lovers that night in the court in Dunmore. And one of them ended up dead due to sewing misadventure. That's what I call it. It was a sewing accident.
Well, now you have a couple other stories that get a little racy and perhaps a little clandestine lovers that are keeping it on the down low.
Yeah, I do. I have George Van Horn and Josephine Westcott. Josephine Westcott, now we're talking probably around 1894. Josephine Westcott's husband, Ira, who lives in Peckville, Ira owns a boarding house up there, and he owns one on the corner of Penn Avenue, and I'm thinking it's Linden. You know where there's a parking garage, there's a tire, where the motel was that they just tore down.
Oh, the red carpet, I think, red carpet or something around McCarthy Tire. Yep.
Okay, right. Okay. McCarthy, the tire company is on one corner. Across the street, as if you were going toward the Times building. Back in the day, there was a boarding house there, and that was owned by Ira Westcott. And Ira put his wife, Josephine, in charge of taking care of the boarding house. And Josephine's got, her boarders and yada, yada, yada. And one of them is a man named George Van Horn. Well, George was living there for a while. And, of course, Ira's not around. And George is a good looking guy. And, one thing leads to another. And the next thing you know, Josephine and George are involved in a relationship. And this relationship goes on for quite a while. And, when Josephine wants to, even though he lives in the boarding house, they still want to be cool that, like Ira's not here checking on stuff or whatever. So George is out working or whatever, which by the way, she did, sneak through courts and stuff like that. I've seen incidents where people said like during George Van Horn's trial that they saw her bringing him lunch and stuff, but she was going through the courts. When you're doing something like that, like you think that nobody knows, here's the deal. Everybody knows. Okay, everybody knows. You're trying to be cool about it, but everybody knows. Well, what Josephine would do is hang like a towel or a handkerchief in the window of her boarding house. And George was in the court, which would be down by St. Mary's Byzantine Church there. So George would watch for the little signal to be sure, and then they would do their thing. And a lot of times they would do their thing and they would meet in the cellar. And cellars back then were a lot different than they are now. People could have cots down there and things like that. Well, as time goes on, I think what happened is George just did not want to be in this illicit relationship. And I think he wanted to go elsewhere. He had been elsewhere. He had previously been married. He was living out west. He came back. I think at some point he just says, like, this is going nowhere. So he tells Josephine in the basement of the boarding house that he doesn't want to be in a relationship with her anymore. And, sometimes that doesn't really go well. And
What?
it's a two-way street. Sometimes guys get really upset and do funky stuff, or sometimes ladies get funky stuff. And Josephine ended up with her throat cut.
Oh.
Now, George says he didn't do it. Josephine, you have to realize now she comes up from the basement and her throat's cut, but she can still talk, which tells me, George Van Horn, from the description of it, was a very big man. If he wanted to kill this woman, he could have done it easily.
Mm-hmm.
This woman comes up from the basement, her throat is cut, she's bleeding, and the only thing really her boarders hear her say is, George Van Horn killed me. Well, she can't come up, think about it now, okay? I'm kind of thinking what might have happened was it was a case of, George, don't leave. If you leave, like, life isn't worth living, I'm going to cut my throat. Maybe things got a little, like, deep there. Like, maybe she accidentally cut a little bit more. She probably didn't mean to. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah. So things went farther than she wanted them to.
She wanted them to go. She didn't mean for it. It was kind of like this little attention getter, like, but it didn't work out. So she comes up the steps and she says, George Van Horn killed me. Well, of course she can't come up the steps and say, George wanted to leave and I did this to myself, because now if her husband finds out, or if her husband finds out she was in the cellar messing around with George, she's got even more problems, which aren't as big as what's going on now with her
bleeding out of her throat. Yeah.
She's got more problems. Well, they get a doctor there and the doctor takes her over to the hospital, and Josephine dies. So now George really has a situation. Maybe he did. Maybe he did it. Maybe he didn't. Again, I'm always leaning toward, something. Okay, so George bugs out of town. Nobody can blame him. He's in trouble. He's got to get the heck out of here. So George bugs out of town and goes west, and he's staying with one of his friends out there, and one of his friends turns him in.
Bastard.
Yeah. So of course somebody here from the police department has to mosey out to, I think it's Iowa, and they've got to bring George back. And George, what's he gonna do? What's he gonna do? There's nobody there to defend him. There's nobody. It was an illicit relationship. Nobody knew what was going on. What's he gonna do? He ends up going to trial. The ladies in Scranton love him.
Oh, he must have been a looker, huh?
He's a good-looking man. He's a bad boy. Women love bad boys.
Oh, women get into such trouble with bad boys.
So they're turning up at the trial. They're watching this, and things just don't go well for George. And George ends up hanging down at the Lackawanna County Jail. And I researched out the whole family, and it's almost like nothing went well for anyone after that. Nothing
Mm.
went well for anyone. The people who prosecuted George Van Horn, the judge, the family, they all, Josephine's family, they all came to bad ends. It was almost, when I looked at it, it was like, whoa, a karma thing here.
Yeah.
Like maybe he really didn't do this, but he really had no way out. And here they were. Him and Josephine had been lovers for years. Strange twist of fate. This is what happens. It was by his lover's words that he ends up at the end of a rope.
Mm-hmm.
I now have George in my care at the Dunmore Cemetery in an unmarked grave. And I don't let out George's location because I don't want anybody bugging George.
Leave him alone in peace, right?
Yeah, George is out there. Josephine ended up in a now defunct cemetery up the line somewhere.
Okay.
Every time I stop at that light downtown, I always think of two lovers and one hanging the towel in the window and the other one watching from down in the court. Like,
well, I'm sure you could have seen something similar some months back on the opposite side of the street at the Red Carpet Inn, right?
Yes.
Only a little less romantic.
Yeah, probably. I'm sure there were things going on in there, and it's part of what makes Scranton so wonderful.
Granted. What was there anything about the husband, Ira? Did he play a role at all? Did he ever find out about the affair? Do you know?
Well, I'm sure Ira probably did find out about the affair, but
Yeah.
I believe, I would have to look at my notes. I believe Ira drowned in a fishing accident shortly thereafter. So,
oh, well, he probably died doing what he loved.
Ira didn't really have too long to ponder on it from what I remember, because I'm pretty sure Ira drowned. And like I said, all of them came to a bad end. And the newspaper description of George's hanging said that, like, he walked up there very cool. He didn't freak or anything. He was a man who had, this is it. And they said that he just looked at everyone. And with that last look, like, did he roll the dice? And like, that's it. You know what? It's going bad for me. Well, guess what? It's going bad for all of you.
He put a little hex on them or whatever.
It almost, honestly, when I was researching it, it was just like, it does look like he did something here, but the one guy, I believe it's John R. Jones. Again, I would have to check my notes, but I'm almost positive. I think John R. Jones was the attorney that prosecuted him, and he wasn't feeling well. And he was doing exercises on his second story porch, which I believe was on a house over in Greenridge. And whatever exercises he was doing, in my mind, it's always jumping jacks, whatever exercises.
A medicine ball being tossed back and forth.
Yeah, well, I don't know what he was doing. He hadn't been feeling well, but he's out there on the porch doing his exercises, and I shouldn't laugh, but he exercised right over the balcony.
Oh my.
I always have visions of him doing jumping jacks, and that's how he went over the balcony. But some of the folks that were connected to this little love thing going on that went bad ended up coming to really bad ends.
Well, you mentioned about, you said he was a good looking guy, right? George, and the ladies liked him. I instantly thought of, and I mean, this is pretty common, right? How often have people, they see like Hugo Solinsky, right? Remember, he got a lot of fans locally because he was a handsome young guy, and people liked him. A lot
of them. Look at Ted Bundy.
Yep.
I mean, there were women who were willing to do anything for, they didn't care, or marry. There were women who were willing to marry him.
Yeah, you have to. I mean, I guess those are the ones who, these men were physically attractive, but I guess there's also something more, just the mystery or whatever it is that they want to be near it. Yeah, danger. That's right. Yeah. I think that's a little too much danger for me. I can get close to the oven and just,
Yeah.
I don't need to be going after that kind of danger. No thanks. I'm not that hardy. So, okay. So that was George and Josephine. And it's so funny. Now, every time I go down to that corner downtown, I'm going to be looking for a towel.
You're going to be thinking about them too.
I am. I'll be thinking that's where she hung her little come get me signal
in the window.
her sex towel hanging out the window there. Oh, back then it wouldn't have been called that, right? I don't know what they didn't talk about sex so freely back then. So who you have, I know you have at least one other story to share.
Yeah, I have it. Well, I have your classic lovers, and then I do have your one other one that's a little bit unconventional. Our classic lovers are John and Teresa Zimmer. And the Zimmers have become quite famous because Nelson Wood and I portray them from time to time. They surface. John and Teresa Zimmer had two sons, and they lived on North Main or South Main Avenue. I guess when you go down past, I'm sorry, I don't know my streets in Scranton. When you go down past the mall and the Trolley Museum and the Mart's bus terminal, and you go up that hill, and Manning's Ice Cream is at the top of it.
Oh yes, okay, Music
And
Street.
not Music.
Meadow?
No, I'm going over into West Side.
Oh, you're going to West Side. Okay, so Main Avenue. Main Avenue? I guess that would be Main Avenue. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, when you get to the top of that hill, you've got the ice cream place in that small little strip mall there. You make a left when you're at the light. So now you're on like South Main. Well, the Zimmers had a furniture store in the 200 block of South Main.
Okay.
And it was a thriving business. They came from New Jersey together. New Jersey, it started off as a pottery / China business because when they were living in New Jersey, they lived in the thriving at the time pottery community. That was in New Jersey. And at some point, they decided that they were going to come up here. And they started off, selling China and stuff like that. And eventually they expanded to selling furniture. And they were doing very well with it because John Zimmer had an idea that if you advertised people's apartments, you would get people coming in looking for apartments. And while they were looking for apartments, they were going to need furniture. So he ends up doing very well with his furniture business. And
That's smart. That's very smart, by the way.
Yes, it was. For back at the time, it actually was very, very smart. Well, John and Teresa decided, 4th of July, 1912, that they were going to go out on a business / pleasure trip out west because there was a furniture one town, and the town escapes me right now, but it was big in the furniture industry. And the Zimmers decided, we're going to go on this business / pleasure trip. And they get the train down at the Lackawanna station. And, they're going up through Corning, New York. On their way to their destination out west. And things just did not go well at all. The train that they were on ended up stopped on the railroad tracks. Conditions were not good. There was a lot of fog and stuff like that. And I believe there was something wrong with the train that they were on. And there were men on the rails to alert any other trains that would be coming that, there's something wrong up ahead. Well, the driver of one train, the engineer of one train has a hangover. Of course, back then in 1912, there's no regulation of stuff like this. There's none of this 8 hours on, 8 hours off. You can't, he was out, he had a hangover, and he missed the signs, alerted to the fact that there was a problem up ahead. And he had an iron train, and what the Zimmers were on was a wooden train car. And that train rear-ended the train that the Zimmers were on. And the Zimmers died together on the 4th of July, 1912. And they are together out in the Dunmore Cemetery. They're cremated. They're in a pyramid. When people go by, they'll see this pyramid.
That is the coolest thing when I've walked through there. It just looks it looks beautiful. It's just very striking. Yeah.
Very, very interesting for its time because a lot of people don't realize that you could be cremated back then, that Scranton had a cremation society. They were Christian Scientists. They did get cremated. They've left niches there for their family for generations. If you look at it, their sons are in there. I think as recently as the 1980s, some of their family has come up in cremated remains and been put in that pyramid. So, you have John and Teresa out there, and even though Nelson and I portray them as two people who are fighting, John and Teresa actually do really love each other. It's just that, it's better to go out there with them and be a little bit confrontational because no one has the perfect relationship.
Right. Yes.
If you think that your ancestors didn't fight, well, think again, as they did. And it's always great to go out there and portray these lovers who are like really at each other's throats, because you know what? People love looking at it, especially if they're married. They like looking at it because it's like, you know what? They're fighting and we're not.
It's someone else's drama, right?
Yeah, it's somebody else's drama. Like, because if you were in a restaurant, you had two people sitting at a table, you admit it, you'd be tuned in.
Oh my gosh.
Looking at it.
We love that stuff nowadays in this country,
Yeah.
especially it's interesting because how interesting would it be if you two were out there like, I love you. I love you.
Yeah.
I love you.
Yeah.
I love you.
Yeah, we've really taken off on the Zimmers. I mean, there was one time when Nelson's out there as John Zimmer and he's like, I sent her away. And he's sitting behind the thing and it looks like he's drinking. And of course, like Teresa comes back early from her trip because, or he's gotten her a trip. He wants to make her happy and he's going to take her on a trip. And it's like, how are we going to get there? And he's like, I have 2 train tickets right here. And it's like, you did what? What did you do? You bought me train tickets? No. Or there are times that the two of us will end up, for whatever reason, doing our history thing, and we'll end up in the train station downtown. And like, we just can't help it because it just starts spewing out. So like the Zimmers, like the great lovers and the Zimmers that they are with their pyramid, end up in the train station downtown fighting like cats and dogs. It's just what we do. And we have people now who will walk up. It's interesting because now the Zimmers just go on. I mean, Nelson and I will be walking downtown and we get people who come up to us and it's like, we know how you died. Like, you do? Yeah, you were in a train crash. And it's like, and what a wonderful vehicle that these two lovers have taught people so much about train travel.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody did it back then, but it
Yeah.
wasn't always the safest thing.
Yeah.
And they are not the only couple that I have out there who died together in a train crash. I have Grace Rudder and her husband, and
oh wow,
also killed together in a different train crash. So it happened. So
oh yeah.
Lovely couple, with the Rudders and the Zimmers. The Zimmers left 2 beautiful sons. And their sons' lives were never the same after they lost their mother and father. So the Zimmers, we kind of have a soft spot for them.
Oh, and it's terrible that they both died, and leaving the sons. But in one way, there's also something somewhat romantic about them going together and their spirits living together in the afterlife. If people believe in that they're out there together looking over their family. Yeah.
And that's what Nelson and I always said. We usually ended up, that we're together forever. And we wouldn't want it any other way. When we are the Zimmers, we always say that they are, no matter how much they fight, those two are a constant. They always say how happy. And when you look at some of the stones out there, there is one mausoleum, and I believe it's relatively recent. I watched for the longest time an elderly man come and visit that mausoleum. His wife had passed, and he could not have been more devoted. It was such a struggle to watch him walk and put flowers. And I would look at him and I would think, dear God, please just let him go because he misses her so much. And then you have Dr. Fury in the back. When you look at his mausoleum, he was a heart doctor.
Oh.
He has Love Conquers All on his mausoleum.
Okay.
So you see some really, really, beautiful things out there. And love really is, Harriet Marriott Robertson, she's a stone in the ground. Her and her husband she was a music teacher, and her husband was, he worked with the ICS, and they traveled the world. And she died here in Scranton, and her stone says, wife, helpmate, companion of John, Robertson, crossed the bar in Scranton, Pennsylvania, which crossing the bar is the Tennyson poem. And she's got this beautiful tribute. And like, when I look at that, I think, oh my God, her husband loved her so much to put this stone here like this. And not far from her, the last person we have is Marie Wainwright, who Marie is just, she's amazing. She was a great Shakespearean actress.
Oh, wow.
And with Edwin Booth and the Booth Salvini Company. So Marie is like really ripping up the stage. I mean, she's not small potatoes. Marie Wainwright was a big deal in her day. And she did a lot of Shakespeare, and she ended up doing silent movies. She didn't like silent movies, and she tried to adapt into vaudeville when went in that direction. But Shakespeare was her thing. She claimed she was married to another great Shakespearean actor, Louis James. And they played the stage together a lot. Louis James and Marie Wainwright, they were a big theatrical couple. They weren't married, for the 1880s, the 1890s. Okay, so now like they part company, and she wants a divorce, and he's like, I don't need a divorce. We were never married. And she's trying to save face, we need a divorce. And eventually, like, he just goes off and marries somebody else. Because think about it. I mean, that's like a tabloid kind of thing that you would see today.
Oh, absolutely.
But it was happening back then. Here she is, and she's got a problem because people thought that they were married, and they weren't. And like, I look at Marie, and it's like, what? I don't care if you were married or not. You did your thing. You were, that's it. That's the way life rolls. People think that what happens today didn't happen back then. Well, it did.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Lovers are lovers or lovers or lovers. You're going to have the same scenarios. Hopefully not hat pins, but hey.
Yeah, I don't know how many guys are going to die accidentally from a hat pin these days. I'd question that, but still, accidents do happen, right? So those
accidents
still
happen.
Yeah, accidents happen, and accidents with a wink.
Sometimes stuff happens that looks like an accident, and maybe it's not.
And that is all fodder for you to explore and create stories from and share. And it's great that you get to share. I mean, you get to share these people's memory, and their spirit lives on there in the Dunmore Cemetery, or even in any research and retelling of stories. I think that's great.
We have everything out there, everything imaginable. Like I said, if you think that if you're in a situation today and you think this could never have happened before, well, think again. It happened. And there are, you see it in every cemetery that you walk through, the undying love that some people have for each other. And it's just, it's wonderful when you see the couples that were married 60 some years, 70 years, the whole together forever. I have one man who was so distraught over the loss of his wife, he walked down into the stream that used to be there, and he drowned himself. I didn't think that you could do that. I thought reflexes would take over, but no, there is a way that you can do it. I have another man out there who he was a cabinet maker, and he made matching his and hers coffins for him and his wife.
Oh, wow.
It's just, and you probably think, well, why are you doing that? Like, I'm not going to need that or what, but you know what? They ended up, and when I find stories like that, it's like, you think about them now, like there they are, they're out there somewhere.
Yeah.
They're enmatched. And for me, they're all still out there. They're all loved. Every one of them. My love story with all of them. I love them all. Every one of them. I don't care what they did. I love them all.
And see, as I said at the beginning, there's all kinds of love, right? And there's,
Yep.
I mean, we talk about when we think about Valentine's Day, of course, we think of typical romance stories and all that, but really it's just celebrating love, right?
Mhm.
Just that love and the warmth and just caring about others and just even memories and stories. And it's just a connection. It's a great time to connect. You know, I remember, it just hit me now. I'm sure you probably did this in school too. Did you pass out the Valentines when you were a
Yeah,
kid? I
the
used to love
Valentine.
that. I mean, it's such a, I mean, in one way it was kind of like, I don't know, there was negative side too, because, if you didn't get one from a certain
Yes.
person, or if you were deliberately left out, there was a chance of feeling hurt. But it was just such a nice, sweet way to like, it just spread some joy in the classroom. And it just, well, nowadays, that obviously during COVID, you couldn't pass Valentine's. I imagine that wouldn't happen, but maybe they'd share something on Snapchat instead, which is kind of not the same at all.
No.
But
You used
not
to
the
make the
same at all.
Valentine's box and decorate it.
Oh God, I love those. I remember having one in my family when I was a kid. My dad likes to make things, and he covered it with tissue papers and put the hearts. And it was just my father, my mother, my older brother, and my grandmother live with us. So there's only 5 of us, but still, we'd put all the envelopes in
Yeah.
the box and pull them out. And that's one of my fondest memories of Valentine's Day. Yeah, I love that. So thank you, Julie. Any closing or parting words of anything that you'd like to share, either from this life or beyond?
I'm just going to say that I have been in a cemetery for 20 some years. In my 20 some years, I have seen a lot. The secret to all of it is to love. If you love, you don't leave, or you get to come back. That's what I see. You have to be love and be loved. That's it. Love is bigger than death. And that's the deal. Just go out there, love, live, like enjoy yourself, do good for others. And you know what? You'll get to stay.
Yeah.
I don't know if it makes any sense.
No, I think that's
That's
great.
what
Love
I'm
is
shooting
bigger.
for.
Love is bigger than pretty much
Yeah,
everything. You're right.
everything.
So live in love with a full heart, and that's a great way to end. Thank you so much. And I don't know if anybody who's been listening on a regular basis, you might be thinking, didn't I hear from this gal before? You sure did. Back in October, Julie was a guest on Uncorked with Funny Wine Girl, and she was talking about leading up to the cemetery tour. And like I said, she does fantastic and interesting research, and then she and her departed players portray these wonderful stories throughout history, and she just does a great job in the fall. So watch for that. That will be coming up again next year. But yes, she was here. She shared her story, some stories from throughout Scranton and beyond. And I'm so glad that you were able to join me now and just celebrate love for February. So,
Happy
and you,
Valentine's Day, Janine.
thank you. Happy Valentine's Day to you and Tom. Enjoy and just listen, everyone. Heed Julie's advice. It's wonderful. And I want to thank you so much for tuning in to Uncorked with Funny Wine Girl. This has been Funny Wine Girl, aka Janine Luby. If you like what you heard today, please remember to subscribe and share it with a friend. And if you didn't like it, then just tell your goldfish or your dog, like, oh my gosh, Julie's dog. So you have to go to YouTube and see Julie's beautiful new rescue dog, Abby. Oh my gosh, talk about love. Now that is unconditional love with the licks on the face. Thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate you from the bottom of my heart and the bottom of my wine glass.